Hi, Professor Luna. This is Lonnie Ortiz coming from you live from my living room. I just wanted to do my video portion for the final. My paper is titled To Sabbath or Not to Sabbath. I start off with talking about the importance of the integration between communication in the Bible. When people look through the Bible, they don't really understand that there are so many communication tools within the Bible. Between, verbal communication and nonverbal, when God speaks to people like Adam and Eve, or when the serpent speaks to Adam and Eve and things like that. So I really address the importance of, hey, there is communication within the Bible. That's kind of where we get it from. And there's, the key points in it. There's some good communication. There's some bad communication. There's some nonverbal. You couldn't see the expression on God's face, but he was speaking through a burning bush. So definitely communication between inanimate objects like that, even though it was God possessing the bush kind of thing. Anyway, so I start off talking about the story in Matthew chapter 12, verses 1 through 8. And it speaks about when the Pharisees are with Jesus and the disciples are saying, okay, we're hungry. So let's go get some food. Let's go dig up some food from the ground. And so they start plucking food from the ground. And the Pharisees notice that they're doing this, except it's the Sabbath day. And so the Pharisees go up to Jesus and question and say, well, why are they doing this kind of work on the Sabbath day? And Jesus kind of reassures them that this is the old law, and that no matter when the Sabbath day is, or, what you do on the Sabbath, what's important is that Jesus is Lord on the Sabbath. And so I kind of talk about the kind of filters that the Pharisees have. The Pharisees grew up in the teachings of the Jewish community and the Jewish tradition. And so they were so caught up in the rules and the regulations of, things like the Sabbath and how you're not supposed to do any kind of work on the day of the Sabbath. And so I basically was talking about why the Pharisees thought that this was such a weird and kind of bad thing that the disciples were doing this, but they had their own filters, because in the Old Testament, the reason why God was punishing his people was because they weren't keeping the covenant. And so part of it is the Pharisees wanting to keep the covenant, wanting to keep these rules, these laws, these regulations, so that they may not be punished by God. And so when they see that Jesus is okay with people doing these kinds of work on the Sabbath, it's almost really strange to them. And so I also tie that into my own personal story of when I grew up in a church where it kind of was like that. A lot of rules, a lot of regulations. I knew, not to swear. I knew not to have sex before marriage and things like that. But I never knew why. And I didn't understand that there was this relationship that you can have between yourself and God if you allowed it, but I never was modeled that. And so I always think, well, I kind of was a Pharisee growing up, because I would point at people and I would judge them and I would say, well, why are they doing this, this, and this? The Bible says to do this, and so on and so forth. And so I think that's where I kind of relate to the Pharisees, at least growing up, that is. And then I realized that Jesus isn't so concerned about the rules and the laws and the regulations of the old law, at least. He fulfills all of that. And so that's what I'm talking about in my paper. I hope you enjoy reading it, and thanks for having me in your class. Thanks, Professor.